Everyone already knew about Melania Trump's righteous $900 million lawsuit against her, and The View is still raging as of March 13th, 2025, and the outrage is palpable. Will this lawsuit be the first step in finally holding the media accountable? And more importantly, why is this case stuck in the swamp of left-wing schemes? If Melania's victory was as clear as daylight, why hasn't she seen a single dime from those snakes at ABC? And here's the real kicker. Who's the shadowy coward pulling strings to stall justice for America's most unfairly attacked First Lady? For a month, patriots at Fox News and across the heartland cheered what should have been a knockout blow, a historic defamation suit to crush The View and send a deafening roar to the radical left. Your days of spewing venom at conservatives are over. That's what Melania deserved after years of their vicious assaults. But this fight's far from done. Look close and you'll see the truth. The woke elite are hell-bent on robbing her triumph. She hasn't pocketed a cent. ABC's appeal clogs the courts, their slimy legal vultures clawing to gut the payout she's owed. The View's running a gutless counterattack, hiding behind delays, slamming 15 procedural roadblocks in 2 weeks, insiders say. A New York judge even got a late-night call from some Soros-linked fixer, or maybe a corporate stooge, proving this isn't just Melania versus The View, it's her against a corrupt machine shielding its liars. Meanwhile, the left's media circus is in overdrive. For years, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, and MSNBC, mouthpieces of the deep state, have trashed Melania, calling her cold and unfit because she stood by Donald Trump, the greatest president we've known. Now, with her lawsuit poised to bury their precious View, they're scrambling to smear her again. She's after cash, not justice, they sneer. Rachel Maddow spins lies. She's Trump's 2025 weapon. A Guardian coward claims she's plotted this since 2023. All baseless, but their filthy game works. Over Melania scam explodes with 500,000 tweets, fueled by woke influencers and spineless Democratic senators desperate to save their media cronies. They want her as the villain, not the victim. Inside ABC's panic room, execs are sweating, fight and risk total collapse, or grovel with a deal. Settling admits they're guilty, losing means The View's toast, and patriots say good riddance. This is Melania's war for truth against a lying elite. So why's justice stalled? Who's propping up The View? What bombshell are they terrified we'll find? One thing's damn sure, this battle's just heating up, and Melania's not backing down. It looks like The View is on the ropes. Their credibility is crumbling, their legal team is scrambling, and public opinion is turning against them. But what if I told you they're not fighting alone? What if this lawsuit isn't just a battle between Melania Trump and The View, but part of something much bigger? Because behind the scenes, powerful forces are mobilizing to protect the show, bury the case, and crush Melania's fight for justice. This is no longer just a defamation lawsuit. It's a war being waged by the left's most entrenched institutions, and they are determined to make sure Melania Trump never sees justice. ABC's lawyers aren't just appealing the ruling. They've filed a formal request to dismiss the case entirely. Their argument? That The View's statements about Melania were protected speech and that allowing the lawsuit to stand would endanger press freedom. It's an absurd claim. Defamation isn't free speech, but their real strategy is clear. Stall, delay, and drag this case out until Melania is pressured into settling. And ABC isn't working alone. Prominent Democratic politicians have now entered the fray, claiming that Melania's lawsuit is an attack on the First Amendment. Elizabeth Warren, Adam Schiff, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have all released statements condemning the case, with Schiff even calling it a dangerous precedent that could silence the free press. Even the White House is subtly backing The View, with Biden's press team refusing to condemn their comments and instead warning about political interference in journalism. But the most blatant move comes from the media itself. The Atlantic, Politico, and the New York Times have launched a coordinated PR campaign to shift public opinion. Their message? That Melania is the real villain in this story. They want you to believe that this lawsuit isn't about justice, but about power. that Melania Trump, of all people, is somehow using this case to silence free speech and manipulate the legal system for personal gain. The same media that spent years attacking her now wants to pretend she's some Machiavellian mastermind, pulling strings from behind the scenes? Give me a break. And the smear campaign isn't stopping there. MSNBC just aired an exclusive, featuring an anonymous source, a former associate of Melania, who claims she secretly despises Donald Trump and has been trying to leave him for years. The source offers no evidence, no proof, just a sensational headline. And, as expected, every major left-wing outlet picks up the story, running it as if it were fact. Exclusive, Melania's secret misery, reads one headline. Trapped in a political marriage, says another. It's blatant misinformation, but that's the point. They don't need it to be true. They just need enough people to believe it. CNN is going even further. They've actually compared Melania to Hillary Clinton, claiming that, just like Hillary, she's leveraging a legal battle to build her own power base. Absurd. Hillary built her career on riding Bill Clinton's scandals to political office. Melania, on the other hand, has never sought public office, never pushed a political agenda. She just wants justice for the relentless lies thrown at her. But none of that matters to CNN. If they can frame her as some ruthless political operator, they can convince their audience that she doesn't deserve sympathy. And then there's Twitter, or rather the left's propaganda network disguised as social media. A coordinated disinformation campaign is flooding the platform, with thousands of blue-check activists pushing Melania scam, a trending topic built on absolute lies. Their narrative, that Melania is faking this lawsuit, grifting off conservatives, and playing the victim for financial gain. Within 48 hours, the hashtag has over 500,000 tweets, boosted by the same Democratic influencers and media hacks who spent the last decade calling her a traitor to women. The goal? To rewrite history in real time, to bury the truth under an avalanche of propaganda, and to make the public doubt what they already knew, that Melania Trump is the one telling the truth. But here's the real question. Why? Why this level of panic? Why is the entire Democratic machine, from politicians to media to social media networks, mobilizing in full force to defend The View? A mid-tier talk show should not be this important. If they had truly done nothing wrong, they wouldn't need this level of institutional protection. So what are they hiding? And more importantly, why isn't Melania fighting back harder? Why hasn't she personally responded to these attacks? Is there a larger strategy at play? And if Donald Trump does know about this smear campaign, what is he going to do about it? Because one thing is certain, the radical left isn't just fighting to save The View. They're fighting to make sure no conservative ever wins against them again. Just when it seemed like The View was cornered, something shifted. Instead of retreating, they fought back. Not in the courtroom, but where they've always held power, the media. A coordinated campaign began to take shape, one that wasn't just about defending The View, but about turning them into victims, heroes even, in a battle against so-called authoritarianism. The lawsuit wasn't about defamation anymore. It was about protecting free speech, and the entire left-wing establishment was mobilizing to ensure that The View would not fall. The first move was subtle. ABC executives carefully controlled the messaging. The hosts on The View acted as if the lawsuit was beneath them, barely acknowledging it at first. But then major Democratic figures started appearing on the show, spinning the case as a direct attack on journalism. Kamala Harris warned that if lawsuits like Melania's succeeded, it would set a chilling precedent where the wealthy and powerful silence the free press. Adam Schiff, never one to miss an opportunity to grandstand, claimed that this is exactly what authoritarian regimes do, weaponize the courts against those who expose them. Suddenly, The View wasn't a daytime talk show caught lying about the First Lady. They were brave truth-tellers, being unfairly persecuted. Then came Sunny Hostin's performance. In an emotional monologue, she declared that she wasn't just being sued, she was being silenced. She framed the lawsuit as part of a broader attack on women in journalism, claiming, "This isn't just about me. This is about stopping powerful men from using the legal system to shut down women who speak truth to power." The audience erupted in applause. Melania Trump, the woman who had been relentlessly smeared for years, was now being painted as the oppressor. Right on cue, Defend the View started trending on Twitter. But this wasn't organic outrage. It was a coordinated push. Within hours, thousands of left-wing influencers, media figures, and political operatives were repeating the same talking points. The lawsuit wasn't about defamation, they insisted. It was about Trump's allies trying to destroy the free press. Celebrities jumped in, late-night comedians mocked Melania, and left-wing think tanks published op-eds defending the View. This was a full-scale information war, and it was working. But then a leak changed everything. A late-night drop by an independent journalist exposed an internal ABC email detailing their entire strategy to shift the narrative. Dated weeks before the lawsuit gained traction, the email laid out a step-by-step plan to frame the View as victims, bring in Democratic politicians to reinforce the message, and coordinate with influencers to control online discourse. The email confirmed what many already suspected. This wasn't just a natural media response, it was scripted. ABC scrambled to contain the fallout. Fact-checkers rushed to dismiss the leak, calling it unverified. Twitter suppressed discussion, marking posts about it as potentially misleading. But the damage was done. The truth was out. This wasn't just a media reaction, it was an operation. So now the real question is, if this was planned from the start, what else have they manipulated? And with this revelation, does Donald Trump finally step in? Because if this is how they fight, Melania's lawsuit is just the beginning. The left-wing media has a new strategy. Drag Trump into Melania's lawsuit and turn it into a political war. At first, it was just whispers, subtle suggestions that this case wasn't really about defamation, but about something bigger. But within days, it became their primary talking point. CNN, MSNBC, and the New York Times all conveniently discovered that Trump was supposedly orchestrating the lawsuit from behind the scenes. Their claim? That Trump had been secretly advising Melania's legal team, directing them to use this lawsuit as a weapon to silence the free press ahead of the 2024 election. Then came the View's counterattack. Suddenly, Trump's name was everywhere on the show. Whoopi Goldberg suggested that Melania doesn't even care about this lawsuit and that it's really just part of her husband's plan to settle scores. Sonny Hostin pushed the idea that Trump was weaponizing the legal system, just like he had threatened to do in his campaign. The message was clear. Melania wasn't the real plaintiff. She was just a pawn in Trump's revenge plot. And then came the so-called bombshell report from Politico, citing an anonymous former Trump official who claimed this lawsuit was part of a calculated strategy to intimidate liberal media. The report had no evidence, just the same anonymous insiders who always appear when the left needs a narrative boost. But that didn't stop major outlets from treating it like fact. But here's the problem. There is no evidence Trump is involved. Trump has not made a single statement about the lawsuit. If he were interfering, wouldn't there be proof? Instead, the media treats his silence as evidence of shadowy influence. It's a classic trick. If he speaks, he's interfering. If he doesn't, he's secretly plotting. Melania's legal team has already shut down the rumors, stating, "This is Mrs. Trump's personal lawsuit with no involvement from the White House." But the media ignored it. So why push this now? Because Melania is winning. The left needs to shift the narrative before the case turns against them. By making it about Trump, they can turn the View into a victim of political persecution instead of a defamation case. But will it work? Or is this just another desperate distraction? Because one thing is clear, the media isn't done playing games. They know they can't win in court, so they've chosen a different battlefield, a full-scale media smear campaign. The View isn't just defending itself anymore. It's launching a calculated, brutal attack on Melania Trump, using every dirty trick in the book. They've weaponized the press, turned social media into an echo chamber, and are flooding the internet with manufactured scandals designed to destroy her credibility. It started with coordinated media attacks. CNN, MSNBC, and The Atlantic all ran near-identical stories, questioning Melania's motives. "Is Melania Trump cashing in on controversy?" asked one headline. "The $900 million payday, how Melania Trump turned victimhood into profit," claimed another. It wasn't about facts, it was about planting doubt. The message? Melania isn't fighting for justice. She's exploiting the system for personal gain. Then came The View's next move, a manufactured bombshell from an anonymous source. One morning, an unnamed insider was brought on the show, claiming that Melania didn't actually care about the lawsuit and was only using it for attention. The audience gasped. Sunny Hostin, emboldened, took it even further. Melania doesn't love Trump, she declared. She's just there for the power. The smear campaign was in full swing, and suddenly it wasn't about The View's lies. It was about Melania's character. And then came the most audacious claim yet. The New York Times ran a story suggesting that Melania had been considering divorce right before the lawsuit was filed. No proof, no sources, just a sensational, baseless accusation designed to shake public perception. Within hours, where Melania scam was trending on Twitter X, pushed by the same activist networks that had defended The View from day one. This wasn't news, it was a coordinated operation. Behind the scenes, ABC hired crisis PR firms to control the damage, flipping the narrative. The goal? Make Melania the attacker, not the victim. They paid analysts to flood TV segments with warnings about the dangerous precedent of her lawsuit. Suddenly, the conversation was no longer about whether The View defamed her. It was about whether Melania herself was the real threat. But conservatives weren't about to let this slide. Fox News exposed the so-called anonymous insider on The View, revealing that he was a former Democratic campaign staffer. Tucker Carlson fired back with an explosive segment, breaking down how left-wing media manufactures stories to protect its own. And Melania took to X, warning his millions of followers. They don't want justice, they want control. Then for the first time, Melania Trump herself spoke out. In an exclusive statement to a conservative outlet, she didn't hold back. They have lied about me for years and I have remained silent. But not this time, she declared. This is not about politics. This is about the truth, and I will not let them rewrite it. And with that, the narrative began to crack. So now the real question is, how much longer can The View sustain this lie? And more importantly, does Trump step in, or is this Melania's fight to finish? Everything is about to change. A bombshell email leak from ABC has just exposed what many suspected all along. The View's attacks on Melania Trump weren't spontaneous. They were planned. This wasn't just reckless commentary, a slip of the tongue, or personal opinions aired in the heat of the moment. It was a coordinated, premeditated smear campaign, orchestrated months in advance. And now the truth is out. The leaked email, first obtained by an anonymous insider at ABC, lays it all bare. Executives at The View had been planning for months to paint Melania Trump as a distant, detached, and cold-hearted woman. The directive was clear. Push the narrative that Melania hates Trump, and she's just staying with him for the money. But it didn't stop there. Sunny Hostin, the loudest voice in The View's anti-Melania crusade, was specifically instructed to escalate these attacks on air. The email, allegedly sent by a senior ABC producer, outlined specific talking points. Melania must be portrayed as a reluctant first lady, as someone who despised her role and saw herself as a victim. The goal? To weaken public sympathy for her, ensuring that any lawsuit she filed would be met with skepticism. This wasn't speculation. It was documented, written in black and white, and now it was out in the open. But as expected, the left-wing media scrambled to contain the damage. ABC executives went into full crisis mode, immediately calling the email a fabrication. They claimed it was doctored, insisting that someone was trying to discredit a respected journalistic institution. But there was one massive problem. Independent cybersecurity experts analyzed the metadata of the email and confirmed that it was legitimate. This was no fake. Meanwhile, The View tried a different approach. Silence. No mention of the leak on air. No discussion of the explosive revelation that they had premeditated an attack on Melania Trump. Instead, they acted as if nothing had happened. But outside their bubble, the truth was spreading like wildfire. CNN and MSNBC completely ignored the leak. Not a single segment covered the email. Not a single panel debated its implications. Instead, they kept pushing the narrative that Melania's lawsuit was politically motivated, conveniently omitting the fact that their colleagues at ABC had plotted against her from the start. But conservatives weren't about to let this disappear. Fox News immediately ran a segment exposing the leaked email, calling for an official investigation into ABC's editorial practices. Tucker Carlson, never one to back down from a media scandal, released a breakdown of the email, explaining how left-wing media manipulates stories to fit their agenda. Refusing to let the story be buried, Melania took to X, formerly Twitter, and made a bold declaration. This is exactly how corporate media manufactures narratives. They don't report the news, they create it. Unlike previous leaks that were suppressed or shadow banned, Melania ensured that the information about the email remained untouched. Within hours, Raj exposed The View began trending worldwide. The fallout didn't stop there. ABC's major sponsors began reconsidering their partnerships. Companies that had long supported The View were now facing pressure from conservatives and independent journalists alike. Why would any brand want to be associated with a program caught red-handed in a smear campaign? Now the question is, can this email be used as evidence in Melania's lawsuit? Could this be the smoking gun that takes The View down for good? And more importantly, will Trump step in and use this as a launch pad for an even bigger war against the leftist media machine? Because this leak didn't just expose The View, it exposed the entire system. Everything is unraveling, not just for The View, but for ABC itself. What started as a defamation lawsuit has spiraled into something much bigger. With the leaked email exposing a coordinated smear campaign against Melania Trump, ABC is no longer just defending a talk show. It's fighting for its survival. And now the fallout is reaching the highest levels of corporate and political power. The first signs of panic came from ABC's biggest sponsors. As the email leaks spread like wildfire, major advertisers started pulling back. Corporate executives didn't want their brands associated with a network caught orchestrating political hit jobs. Disney, the parent company of ABC, was suddenly under immense pressure. Investors were demanding answers, and board members began questioning whether ABC had become more of a political weapon than a media company. Internal sources reported chaos inside ABC's executive offices, with top brass desperately trying to contain the damage. They issued a vague statement about reviewing internal practices, but it was clear the network was in crisis mode. But the real panic wasn't just within ABC. Democrats were starting to sweat. What if this lawsuit didn't just bring down The View, but pulled back the curtain on something far worse? Inside Congress, Republican lawmakers saw an opportunity. A growing number of conservative senators and representatives began calling for an official investigation into ABC's ties with left-wing political organizations. They wanted to know, was this just an isolated case of bias, or was ABC part of a much larger effort to manipulate elections and silence conservatives? The implications were staggering. If the media's collusion with the Democratic Party was exposed, it could trigger one of the biggest political scandals in modern history. Meanwhile, Democratic strategists were in full-blown damage control. Their biggest fear? That ABC's corruption would be traced back to them. If Republican investigators got access to ABC's internal communications, what else could they find? Could they uncover backdoor deals between liberal media and high-ranking Democratic officials? Could this expose how certain narratives were manufactured to protect their political allies? And then, the biggest question of all, what would President Trump do next? Fox News and conservative media began openly speculating. If ABC was caught fabricating a smear campaign against Melania, how many other political hit jobs had they orchestrated? Could this be the same playbook used against Trump himself during both impeachments? Against Brett Kavanaugh during his Supreme Court confirmation? Against any conservative who dared to challenge the establishment? And then a new rumor started swirling. Sources inside the White House suggested that Trump was considering a major counterstrike. Would he call for a full-scale federal investigation into ABC? Would he demand that Congress dig deeper into media collusion? If Trump took that step, it wouldn't just be about winning a lawsuit, it would be about taking down the entire left-wing media complex. Because now the question isn't just whether ABC is guilty, the real question is, what else are they hiding? And if this scandal keeps growing, could this become the biggest media takedown in American history? When the walls start closing in, everyone looks for a way out. And now it seems like The View is being abandoned by the very people who once protected them. The media machine that spent years shielding the show from consequences is now quietly backing away. What was once a defiant, united front has fractured into panic, internal betrayal, and desperation. The first signs of trouble came from inside The View itself. Sunny Hostin, once the loudest voice against Melania Trump, suddenly found herself isolated. Co-hosts who had previously echoed her rhetoric were now avoiding the topic altogether. Joy Behar and Whoopi Goldberg, usually the most aggressive defenders of the show's left-wing agenda, were now treading carefully. According to sources, both held private meetings with their lawyers, exploring options to distance themselves from the scandal, or even leave the show entirely. Behind the scenes, ABC's executives were watching the ship sink in real time. Ratings were plummeting, advertisers were bailing, and now their own stars were panicking. What had once been a coordinated attack on Melania was now turning into a desperate scramble for survival. The cracks were becoming visible to the public. For the first time, the hosts weren't sticking to the same narrative. The once unified messaging, painting Melania as a manipulator, casting Trump as the mastermind, was starting to collapse. But the real alarm bells started ringing when the broader left-wing media began backing away. At first, CNN, MSNBC, and the New York Times had gone all in defending The View. They had dismissed Melania's lawsuit as a politically motivated stunt and mocked conservative media for taking it seriously. But after the ABC email leak proved that the attacks on Melania were pre-planned, something changed. The silence was deafening. CNN suddenly stopped covering the lawsuit altogether. The New York Times quietly shifted its focus to other topics, no longer running op-eds defending The View. Leftist columnists, who had once mocked Melania's claims, were now cautiously asking whether The View was doing more harm than good for their cause. And then came the biggest betrayal of all. Rumors from within ABC that Disney was actively considering cutting The View's budget or canceling it entirely. Disney, the parent company of ABC, had been reluctant to interfere. But with sponsors pulling out and Republican lawmakers circling, executives were reportedly weighing whether The View had become more of a liability than an asset. If this lawsuit continued spiraling out of control, ABC wouldn't just lose money. They could face serious regulatory scrutiny. Sensing the weakness, conservatives doubled down. Fox News and the Daily Wire continued hammering The View, exposing more behind-the-scenes information about how they manipulated public perception. Elon Musk took to X, declaring, "This lawsuit is exposing the media for what it really is, nothing but a political tool. The days of unchecked propaganda are coming to an end." And in Washington, the calls for accountability grew louder. Republican lawmakers officially demanded a congressional hearing on ABC's involvement in political misinformation. The pressure was mounting. The narrative was shifting. So now the biggest question remains. Can The View survive when even their allies are turning their backs? And if this lawsuit can take down one of the biggest left-wing talk shows in America, who's next? It seemed like this lawsuit would drag on indefinitely, until Melania Trump made an unexpected move that changed everything. In a stunning legal escalation, Melania's legal team announced that they are taking the case to federal court. This isn't just about The View anymore. Now ABC and its executives are facing a battle at the highest level, one that could expose not just their defamation, but a far-reaching media conspiracy. The legal maneuver came swiftly. Melania's attorneys filed a motion to move the case from state court to a federal jurisdiction, arguing that ABC and The View had engaged in a coordinated effort to manipulate public opinion on a national scale. They alleged a systemic violation of personal rights and a deliberate campaign to spread falsehoods with the intent of influencing public perception. If the federal courts accept this case, it could set a historic precedent, one that forces the media to finally face accountability. For ABC and The View, this was a nightmare scenario. Up until now, they had been fighting on their home turf, a civil case in a system where big corporations can stall, appeal, and delay. But a federal lawsuit changes everything. Now government agencies could step in, discovery rules would expand, executives could be called to testify under oath. The View's hosts, who had spent months dodging accountability, could be forced to answer direct legal questions about their involvement in the smear campaign against Melania. The response from The View was immediate panic. Within hours of the legal announcement, sources inside ABC described a full-blown crisis. Producers scrambled to prepare the host for legal scrutiny. Lawyers rushed to challenge the motion, calling it an abuse of power. But behind the scenes, the realization was sinking in. This was no longer just a lawsuit. It was a potential reckoning. The left-wing media machine sprang into action. MSNBC, CNN, and the Washington Post instantly reframed the lawsuit as a direct attack on press freedom. They claimed Melania was being used by Trump to silence the media. A ridiculous claim, considering it was The View that had spent years attacking her. Anonymous sources suddenly emerged, feeding Politico and The Atlantic stories about how Melania was always uncomfortable with Trump's media wars. And then, the Democratic political machine activated. Top Democratic senators rushed to The View's defense, warning that this case threatened the future of independent journalism. Even former Obama officials entered the fray, calling the lawsuit a dangerous step toward authoritarianism. It was a coordinated effort to paint Melania, not The View, as the real aggressor. But if they thought conservatives would back down, they were dead wrong. Republican lawmakers immediately seized the moment. Within hours, leading GOP figures called for a congressional investigation into ABC's relationship with Democratic operatives. Their demand? Full transparency on whether mainstream media outlets had coordinated political messaging with left-wing politicians. Meanwhile, Fox News escalated its coverage, unveiling newly uncovered internal communications, showing how media executives had discussed ways to control the narrative about Trump's 2024 campaign. This wasn't just about The View anymore. This was about exposing how deeply media institutions had worked to manipulate elections, control information, and attack political enemies. And then the internet exploded. With the lawsuit shifting to the federal level, conservatives on X, formerly Twitter, launched a powerful new movement. The hashtag #drain the media began trending, fueled by thousands of posts demanding that Trump's administration take direct action against media corruption. And when Elon Musk himself joined in, tweeting, "The media industrial complex is collapsing in real time," it became clear this lawsuit was no longer just about Melania. It was about dismantling an entire system of propaganda. The View may be nearing its end, but this battle is far from over. What started as a defamation lawsuit has turned into a political earthquake, one that will leave lasting damage, not just for ABC, but for the entire left-wing media establishment. The fallout is massive, and now the question isn't whether The View survives, but what comes next. Facing the threat of a brutal federal court battle, ABC has no choice but to back down. In a desperate attempt to contain the damage, network executives quietly approach Melania Trump's legal team with a settlement offer. They want the lawsuit off the front pages, out of the courts, and buried before it can expose more damaging secrets. But the cost of their surrender is steep. High-profile resignations loom over The View. Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar, both deeply entangled in the scandal, are reportedly considering stepping away from the show, a move insiders say is less about choice and more about saving face. Sunny Hostin, the center of the defamation case, is under even greater pressure. With advertisers fleeing, ABC executives know someone has to take the fall. Meanwhile, corporate sponsors continue to abandon ABC, unwilling to be associated with a program that has now been exposed as a political weapon rather than a talk show. For Disney, the parent company, this is turning into a financial crisis. With conservative boycotts growing and Republican lawmakers demanding more scrutiny, ABC's long-protected status as an untouchable media giant is crumbling. But this lawsuit was never just about Melania's reputation. It has become a defining moment in the war against left-wing media. For years, Melania Trump was treated as an easy target, relentlessly attacked while she remained mostly silent. But this time, she fought back and won. And now she's making it clear, this victory is just the beginning. In a statement following ABC's retreat, Melania refuses to call herself a victim. Instead, she issues a direct warning to the media. For too long, powerful networks have used lies and slander to manipulate public opinion. That time is over. She makes a bold pledge to continue fighting for accountability in the media, ensuring that no one else has to endure the same smear campaigns. Her stand sparks a movement. Conservative voices like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens amplify her message, calling on others who have been smeared by the left-wing media to step forward. This isn't just about Melania, Carlson declares. This is about every conservative who has ever been lied about, every Republican whose reputation they've tried to destroy. And then, the biggest escalation yet, Trump and the Republican Party seize the moment to push for a historic crackdown on media corruption. Inside the White House, senior officials begin exploring legislative options to curb media defamation. One proposal seeks to limit legal protections for media companies, making it easier for individuals to sue for libel and hold networks accountable for politically motivated falsehoods. If passed, this could be the most significant legal reform in decades, one that fundamentally changes how media companies operate. Meanwhile, Elon Musk doubles down on his promise to make X the anti-propaganda platform. In a fiery announcement, he pledges direct support for individuals targeted by media smear campaigns, vowing to fund independent journalism and expose corruption within the industry. With the media on defense and the Republican Party energized by this lawsuit's victory, Democrats are suddenly on high alert. Political strategists warn that this is just the first battle in a much larger war. If The View and ABC could be exposed this easily, what's stopping Republicans from going after CNN, the New York Times, or MSNBC next? So now, the real question isn't just whether The View survives, it's whether this lawsuit was the moment that finally shattered left-wing media's control over public discourse. Because this was never just about Melania Trump. This was about power, manipulation, and a corrupt system that has operated unchecked for decades. And for the first time in a long time, that system is on the verge of collapse.